Bitcoin is imposing the first free market that's ever existed.
I'm going to disagree with people on this panel. I don't think abundance is going to be that great.
I don't believe it's become abundant. There is no playbook because we've never been here before.
You don't magically get disciplined, self-controlled, virtuous people just because you have the system.
I think you're looking at it from such a doomer point of view.
So I want to start off with Jeff. Obviously, Jeff, you wrote The Price of Tomorrow, and it's really changed, it seems like, or at least exploded in the past 6 years. So how has your thesis, or if anything, has changed in that time, and how do you see where we're sitting right now?
Yeah, I don't think anything has changed from what I wrote about there. One system, Bitcoin, is measuring productivity flowing to the world, and one system is extracting that productivity. And that collision of systems is the greatest change that humanity has ever been through. And so I would say most people are still measuring Bitcoin from the fiat currency that's being debased, and they don't realize what Bitcoin is imposing. Bitcoin is imposing the first free market that's ever existed. And as long as it stays decentralized and secure, you could expect the first free market to compete like free markets do, which you've never seen, and us to be in service of each other, where you can only create value by creating value for somebody else. And the entire world works that way, and prices fall forever. So that's where we're going.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. So Natalie.
First of all, Jeff comes to us from the future, okay?
Yeah.
Who wants him to write a sequel to Price of Tomorrow now that we're all living in the AI world that he predicted, right? I do. Who watched our masterclass on inflation and free markets? Yeah. A lot of people have been coming up to me about it, so.
Well, Natalie, you wrote Bitcoin is for everyone. So in this time, right, we're in an interesting period because we still have the world of fiat, and as Jeff said, a lot of people are still pricing in fiat terms, especially Bitcoin. So when you're going through Bitcoin is for everyone and writing that, how do you think that this is going to play in here through the future? And in the inflation masterclass, if you want to give us a little takeaway from that.
Well, truly, Jeff was the first person to help me understand that we don't live in a free market capitalistic society. We think we do, and America has represented a more capitalistic system than in many places or many times in history before, but it's not a true free market. We've never lived in a free market. And so when I think about a future on the Bitcoin standard and the kind of message that I wanted to convey through Bitcoin is for everyone is there is so much hope if we create an economy with ethical money that cannot be corrupted at the base layer, that tweaks the incentive system into one, as Jeff said, where we are rewarded for creating value, and no one has a special advantage, no one can cheat the system, no one is incentivized to do so. And I think that that will help align so many of the things that we encounter on a day-to-day basis that we've seen change or erode or destruct over the many years, which is our relationships with each other and ultimately our relationships with ourselves. How we view ourselves, how we view the future, our potential, what we can achieve, the families that we can build and grow and be able to, save for in the future and the things that we can leave behind for them. I just think that it's going to allow us to become the best version of ourselves and as like collaborators in society. And so I just can't wait for the Bitcoin standard to take hold with the masses, because I think that ultimately represents the world of abundance that I want to see. And I just tried to gently educate people in Bitcoin is for everyone about how broken money has sort of destroyed the incentive for us to respect one another and treat each other with the kind of love that I think we ultimately want to see. So Bitcoin is love, Bitcoin is hope. And I think that first people need to understand why the system's broken so they can appreciate how Bitcoin fixes it.
Yeah, sure. Now, Matěj, with Trezor, obviously, you guys are promoting self-custody. How important do you think that in this world of abundance it is to really become self-sovereign and hold your own money and, utilize one of Bitcoin's true powers in self-custody and being your own bank, so to speak?
Yeah, I believe that, especially with institutions coming to the game more and more, it could almost feel to the individual that owning Bitcoin through funds, exchanges, whatever the custodians are, is actually owning Bitcoin, and we are here to remind them that it's not really, not your keys, not your coins, obviously. And yeah, like we do that, or trying to do that, by the way, here in Prague. It's our home base, by really doing great products and yeah, reminding everybody that you can really, truly own your Bitcoin, on your own. You don't need like a legal contract to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Jimmy, you've been in this space for a very long time, and it seems like it's really shifted and changed. So, how have you seen the just overall Bitcoin space change in your time here, and how do you see us moving into more of a world of abundance now with the utilization of AI?
Yeah, so I'm going to disagree with a lot of the people on this panel. I don't think abundance is going to be that great. And the reason is because we've seen it in a lot of different areas. So for example, it used to be that food was very scarce. We now have entire grocery stores with every kind of food that you can imagine. And what has that done? Well, it's produced a lot of overweight people, right? The thing about abundance is that it's kind of useless unless you have the virtue to go with it. So when you have a lot of people that are used to consuming, that are used to a scarcity mentality, where they're clawing and trying to go get all of that stuff, and then it suddenly flips to abundance, what happens is that they overconsume. And we've seen this in, not just in food, all kinds of stuff, right? I read a statistic about like people on Tinder. They swipe, they evaluate more people in one weekend than, like a person 100 years ago met in their lifetime, which is crazy. That's not something that you should do, but that causes overconsumption, causes all kinds of, bad outcomes as a result of people not having the virtue to handle it. So, and to bring this back to Bitcoin, this is the thing about having having abundance, having a lot of stuff, is that you need to actually step up your game so that you're worthy of it. Otherwise, you are going to get wrecked. There's a lot of people that got into not just Bitcoin, but all kinds of altcoins. And this is the thing that happens is they think, okay, I want more of this. I want more of this interesting play where I got to make 10x my money or whatever. And they kind of got lost in gambling, or they get depressed or whatever. There are a lot of dangers to abundance that I don't think we fully appreciate. And we have to be very careful about managing that. And I'm not sure this world is necessarily ready for the amount of abundance that we're going to have. And you could kind of see it in certain societies. There's the hikikomori in Japan. You have the NEET incels or whatever that are in the US. They are kind of paralyzed and frozen because of the abundance, because they're provided for with all of the stuff that they need to live. They can't actualize all of the actual things that they might be able to do if there were a little bit more scarcity. So I get that it sounds awesome, right? And this is sort of the siren song of socialism and so on, is, hey, everyone's gonna have everything and we're going to all like dance together and sing Kumbaya. That's not how things work. You're going to have overconsumption. You're going to have people that do things that are not necessarily very good for them. And this is something that I've learned in Bitcoin, is that if you have that ramp up be relatively slow, then you have a chance to develop the virtue to be able to handle that abundance. But if you don't, then you're going to be in a position where you're going to actually screw yourself by having that abundance. Like, how many people are addicted to like watching TikTok videos and stuff? It's because of the abundance. Like when I was a kid, you had 5 channels, right? And that's all you could watch. And if it was all boring, you just stop watching.
See,
You don't have that anymore.
I don't believe it's from abundance. I categorically don't believe it's from abundance. I believe our emergent behaviors are emergent from a system we live in. And if the system we live in needs to make our emergent behaviors reliant on other people, that those people matter more than us, we will look to the centralized system and scroll all day long to get validation. Those behaviors are emergent from that. Your emergent behavior from a system of truth looks entirely different. It is impossible to imagine what it looks like from an emergent system of truth, from measuring it from any historical period from a system of control. We've never had it. So I get it. I get what you're saying because you've never seen it. We've never seen it. And you're using examples out of the control system that needs you to prey on fear or anxiety. You're not enough. And so people look to other heroes in that system that extract from them. And you're right. It looks like that. And that means it's going to be a long, long time before people get what we're saying. But on a system of truth, the emergent behavior is totally different. In this room, all of the people I meet, the people that are living in this and spending in it and activating into it, the emergent behavior of them looks different.
I reject part of your message as well, just because I think that it's the fiat system that has created big food, big pharma, big tech. Wow, jinx. And look at the Bitcoiners. I mean, we are a small but growing and powerful community. And emerging from it is, tallow foods and skincare that's natural and decentralized medicine and healthcare and all the things that I think we would actually have seen if our world was built on honest money and on a Bitcoin standard as opposed to what we have. And so the abundance, right now it's filled with rot and corruption and things that distract us and things that decay our morals and values. But that's, again, because fiat ultimately incentivizes you toward grift, to taking advantage, to taking what you can while you can, because the value of the money is eroding so quickly, whereas Bitcoin has you thinking about the long term. And so I think abundance in the Bitcoin world does look very different. And that's why I think we have to do everything we can to encourage people to shift into this parallel system peacefully, sat by sat, so that we can build something that literally no generation before us has seen.
It's actually, it's funny when you say this, Jimmy. When I look at you and I look how long you've been here, when I look at you traveling with your family around the world, I look at somebody with abundance already living in the future. And what emerges out of that is clarity of what really matters, right? The same principles, because you're already living on a system of truth. So when I look at you, who you are to me is already living in the future. And I see that exhibited in a whole bunch of these people. And so when we talk about the system, you're not living in that system. You're living in the new system.
Well, I appreciate you guys saying that. But I'm still hesitant about this because I don't think everyone is like that, right? And that's kind of the problem, is that you do incentivize good behavior from people that are sufficient, that have sort of some threshold of virtue or something like that. But there are a lot of people that aren't like that.
But here's the point. Because it's emergent, and because we don't want to say we're the bad person. And most people are still inside the system, feeding their energy to the other system, complaining about the other people. And if you serve up a villain in that, they will take the villain and instead of pointing the finger at themselves. And what Bitcoin proves, and what you do with Trezor and whatever, if you take agency and move to this new system, nobody controls you. You control you. Nobody can take your agency. You can give your agency. Somebody else is more powerful, and you could look to that. It'll create it. It'll feed back to you. But what I say is, if Bitcoin stays decentralized and secure, it's imposing this discipline. And so if you are this other person, you will get wrecked and wrecked again and wrecked again until you learn, or your kids learn, or somebody learns. Because this is not negotiating with that. It's imposing a new discipline.
And if I may add to many of the problems that have been mentioned, I think honestly, pre-market and open source solves like most of it, kind of, because like you mentioned, you have I don't know, 15 channels, and you are used to maybe one. Well, maybe a lot of people, even in this room, were used to one channel because they lived in the communist era, because communists said, well, you can only watch this and you cannot watch that, right? So I think it's very problematic, obviously. And I think like free market, let the market, choose it and just like create like rules by not creating any rules and do it like in a transparent way, and the best wins in the end. So that's like kind of the
so for
commercial
me,
perspective.
like the Trezor is like a very good way to see this thing because it isn't that hard to set up, right? I like very practically speaking, you write down a bunch of words and you learn how to do it, but it is a big mental load because of the responsibility
Yes.
that you have to have. And that's kind of the point of this abundance mentality is that not everyone wants that responsibility. In fact, they do everything in their power to make sure that they don't have it. But in a post-scarcity world, that responsibility is exactly what you need to be able to handle it.
Yep.
And I'm not sure most people are there yet, or most people even want to go there.
If most people were there, we'd already be all on a Bitcoin standard.
Fair enough.
But that's why essentially we're letting go of a lie one finger at a time. And the change isn't Bitcoin, the change is us. So I totally agree with you. Why it's going to take a long time is a lot of people aren't ready for the change and what this means. So they contribute to the system that they know is insolvent, that is only solvent by debasing their money more. And they're operating in that system, thinking there's some sort that they're helping and there's some other evil person. And it's them contributing to that system that makes the system stronger. And until they take the agency and move over to the other system, they'll stay. So it's going to take a long time. I think you're right. I think, but you don't have to wait. The future is now. You could go right now.
Well, and there's such a contrast in the messages, right? Because the Bitcoin community says, you can do this. You can take self-custody. It's so easy. Here are tools. Let us help you. And what does the fiat system basically teach you throughout your whole life? You need someone to come save you. You can't do this. You're not enough. You're not working hard enough. Compare yourself to someone else. And so there's just such a juxtaposition, again, in terms of just the mentality that you start to embrace. And so I think we've sometimes allowed for the fiat system to cloud our judgment about what's possible in our own lives and judge ourselves and judge other people more harshly. I mean, you mentioned, Jimmy, on stage, the idea of like, well, only people with virtue can embrace it. I think that if you are here, whether you're a Christian like you've done such great work sharing the Bitcoin message from that lens, or you ascribe to another religion, or maybe you're agnostic, the idea that we all have a soul. We are worthy. We're here because we have a soul that connects all of us. We have different levels of expertise and a different sense of purpose. We come from different areas. We come from different socioeconomic backgrounds, but we do have that in common. And I think that in many ways, Bitcoin becomes this great equalizer, that you come to the table with your gifts, abilities, questions, dreams, aspirations, and you're judged in a system that's truly fair. And there are going to be winners and losers, and that's okay. But you can draw inspiration from the winners in this system as opposed to in fiat, where everyone kind of resents the people at the top because they know intrinsically they didn't really get there in a fair way. And so I think that there's something just so magical about a system where, again, you're incentivized to cooperate, to bring the best of yourself, and to ultimately serve others, which is really the core of capitalism. And it's been bastardized, and everyone hates capitalism today because they don't truly understand it or truly experience it.
Jimmy, I have a question kind of as almost a follow-up from all this discussion for you is you mentioned a lot of things like the gambling, the get-rich-quick schemes, but when you really break it down, real wages have been falling for the past 50 years. So do you actually still see it as a world of abundance that we're in right now? Just because I almost feel that it is a mirage of abundance that we have simply because of the fiat system.
Well, there are certain things that definitely have objectively more abundant stuff, right? I mean, I think three of us are authors here. Like just content-wise, there's just so much of it, and objectively, there's way more choices in that regard. And it used to be even back in 2017, there was like one Bitcoin book. Now we have three just on the stage, right? Like that's how much abundance we have on those things. Now, does that mean that people are over-consuming on that? I mean, maybe not on Bitcoin books per se, but there's a lot of other things where people over-consume, and it requires a lot of self-control to not over-consume when you're when you transition from like a scarcity mentality to an abundance mentality. I don't know if you've ever seen like somebody that's older, like on a phone, but they're more addicted than teenagers, right? Like they're not used to having that much entertainment in front of them, and they have developed zero immunity. And I think this is essentially the process that I think will play out from going from scarcity to abundance, is that there's an immunity that needs to be developed, right, by not just individuals, but entire communities, where you start recognizing, okay, well, maybe consuming this too much isn't good for me. And you start recognizing, okay, I need to hold back because scarcity itself isn't holding things back anymore. I can't just go and do X, Y, and Z because it's now infinitely available, and I can like basically waste my life away if I wanted to on a particular activity. So that transition, I think, is going to be pretty painful because there's a lot of people that can't handle wealth or free time or whatever. And like I said, there's a lot of evidence of this. Yeah, I get it. Some of it is induced by fiat, but a lot of it is also induced by the fact that people just don't want to have some of these things, right? They don't want to have self-sovereignty or responsibility. Ideally, we want them to, and I think people are way more actualized in who they want to be if they do, but you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink. And I think there's a lot of people that aren't going to drink, and they're instead going to overconsume on the abundance that's coming. And how do we handle that, right? And like at least in the Bitcoin community, you've had a lot of people go off into altcoins, go off and do stuff that isn't necessarily very good for them. And despite the very fair meritocratic system that you have in Bitcoin, a lot of people have left. And what does that tell you? Like that, like having something good doesn't necessarily mean that everyone will join in that effort. There's a lot of people that kind of will refuse and indulge their own desires and go do things that aren't necessarily good for them.
Well, I feel that in a Bitcoin space and also with AI, right, we're able to create so much more, right? You talked about 3 books here on the stage. I create YouTube videos. A lot of other people do that as well. There's just an abundance of content that we can consume. But I feel in an AI or in a Bitcoinized world, when people need a scarce money, in order to either give up your time or part with some sats, you really have to think about that a little bit more, just because of that scarce fiat or scarce system now playing into an abundance. So I feel even though we have TikTok, Instagram, you name it, all of these different platforms, people are really trying to find the good quality content. And if it's not good quality content or not a good quality book, they're not going to spend their time for that.
I think you make such a great point, this illusion of abundance that we have, because today you can walk into an American grocery store and there's shelves stocked with stuff, but I find most of it to not even be food. Like it's not even edible, nutritious. And we have a lot of stuff, we don't have a lot of quality. I think that's the key point. And again, on a hard money system, you think 10 times more, do I actually want to part ways with this money, which I know is going to go up in value on this thing that I may not even need? You start to like really negotiate with yourself, as opposed to in the inflationary fiat world where you're spending, the prices are going to go up, you want to buy the cheapest stuff. I mean, that's why our world is filled with such junk. I mean, it makes me depressed when I think about the fast fashion, the stuff that ends up in all of our landfills and oceans right now. This is kind of what I touched on with you, Jeff, in one of our interviews, right? Because it's this idea that, oh, people, again, view capitalism, view the ideal system as one where, oh, everyone's just chasing a profit. So ultimately, that's going to destroy even the Bitcoin world because that's capitalism. But that isn't capitalism. Again, you need to serve others. You need to provide value in order to be rewarded. And in our system, it tweaks the incentives. And so it ultimately destroys every product, destroys all of our food. And we end up with, you're right, abundance, but nothing of quality and value, right?
Yeah, I said a long time ago, abundance in money creates scarcity everywhere else. And your TikTok example or your everything else, the technology companies, I had a technology company. I know how the brain works, how they map the brain and get you to be addicted to the thing that keeps you addicted. It's not the person, it's the system. And a system has this control that is farming your attention to keep it system, and people are inside that system. So abundance in money creates scarcity everywhere. Scarcity in money creates abundance, because for the first time ever, we're not in a zero-sum game. We're in an infinite game that nobody can cheat. To create value for somebody, on their terms, they have to part with their money, and then somebody competes with you. And the margin opportunity that you create, there's no monopolies allowed, because the margin creates competition and prices keep falling and they fall faster and faster. So there's two ends of that spectrum. You live on a Bitcoin standard, all productivity forever flows to you. You are owning a piece of the new internet. Most people will sell their piece of the new internet, like you said, for pieces of paper and go back because they won't hold it long enough. They'll get flushed out. But that's what's happening anyways. And all productivity forever will flow to you if you hold Bitcoin. If you spend Bitcoin and accelerate the system, you're going to look like the pizza day person in time. And you'll be happy to, because you've accelerated an ecosystem. For all those living in the abundant money, that has to be more abundant, that has to create more units of money, from that system, everything will look scarce. And why this is so hard is because we're trying to measure, the system change is so staggering, and we're trying to measure the new system from our mental models of the old system that we're within. And all of these things that are so crazy ridiculous or causes are downstream from broken money.
Well, I would agree that a lot of it is from broken money. I've written a book on this, right? Right? A lot of it is from broken money. But it's also the fact that there's an incentive to not be virtuous, right? It's easy to be lazy. It's easy to indulge in whatever addictions that you have. I get it. It's maybe a little less addictive, but you had addicts under the gold standard. In fact, the one thing that people really get addicted to, and there's like ancient memes for this, are people get addicted to hoarding the gold, right? Or hoarding Bitcoin. And that I think you don't magically get disciplined, self-controlled, virtuous people just because you have the system. You're incentivizing it, but in a post-scarcity society with abundance and some of those, there's still going to be a lot of people that end up in bad places.
If you're saying some people will cheat, we categorically agree.
Mm-hmm.
If you're saying some people will resist this, we categorically agree. Right? If you say some people will trade their Bitcoin for the other system, some people will run altcoins, some people will stay in the scam trying to steal from other people, we categorically agree. What I'm saying is it doesn't matter. You don't have to. You can move.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Because if they're trying to steal, I think they're going to try to steal from the people that are disciplined, that are, as you say, living in the future, right? And it's unevenly distributed, and the targets are going to be the people that have, and in that sense, you're going to have to be able to resist all of those temptations even more, right? Because they're going to come after you because you have the money.
Yeah, but Jimmy, I mean, don't you think on a trend line, if we were to compare the fiat system where all of this stuff is increasing and the rate is probably accelerating because we have to in Jeff's book, he did a great job pointing this out. We need more and more debt to produce increasingly less growth, right? And so the system is just like, it's more rapid in terms of its ultimate destruction from within. Whereas on the Bitcoin standard, I would argue that the trend line is going to go down, as opposed to like this type of behavior, which we still, I mean, it's not like the majority of people are engaging in illegal activity or drugs or alcohol or whatever. It's still on the margins, I would say, but the trend line is going like this in fiat and it's going like this in Bitcoin, or if we were on a Bitcoin standard.
Yeah, I mean, you guys obviously know that I think it's going to be better under a Bitcoin standard. The real question, and I think the subject of this panel, is the abundance playbook, right? Dominating the post-scarcity future. What do we do about this transition? Because I don't think it's going to be easy or, I mean, like we tend to think, okay, once we get on a Bitcoin standard, everything's going to be fine. Or, you know, we're going to be fine because we hold the Bitcoin and it's going, we have the asset that everyone wants, we're going to be able to buy whatever. I don't think it's going to be that simple. And I think there's going to be significant resistance. And going through this transition period, right, having a playbook or for figuring out how we play this whole system out, like as we go from scarcity to abundance, that's the part I'm worried about. And I'm not entirely sure that we have a good way to handle it.
There is no playbook. There is no playbook because we've never been here before. We've never had something like this before. So people talk about Bitcoin versus the other system. The other system's insolvent. It's only solvent on an illusion that it's solvent, that you're giving up your agency to somebody else who's going to debase currency. Every time that has happened in history, you move to socialism or fascism, you create bigger enemies, and you go to global conflict. Then when you reset money, you say, you create all these institutions and say, we'll never do this again because we killed so many people, and you start it again. Every time. Same model. That is who we are. And that's inside that system, that is, if you just said probabilities, that's the most likely event. It's going to be messy because that's what people are feeding with their energy. The Bitcoin doesn't care about that system. It's a different system. It has different principles, it's just an honest network. But if you're saying it's going to be messy, it is going to be really messy. And that has nothing to do with Bitcoin. It has to do with this existing system, the illusion that people are in is completely insolvent.
All right, let's make it practical, right? So we're going from scarcity to abundance, okay? And obviously, if we are on a Bitcoin standard, most of the people in this room will be some of the wealthiest people in the world, right? Now, it's a bearer instrument. You're going to have some, and I think we all agree, we're still going to have evil people. How are you going to handle the fact that they might kidnap your kids and demand a whole bunch of money, and you kind of have to give it to them if you want them back? Like, what are you going to do in that sort of instance?
SpaceX IPO is about to mint like 4,000 millionaires and some billionaires. Do you think the first thing they're thinking about right now is, I have a target on my back, everyone's going to try to kill me? No, I think the first thing they're thinking about is, cool, what am I going to do with this newfound economic empowerment, and how can I, hopefully some of them are thinking about, how can I help the world? Like, I think you're looking at it from such a doomer point of view. If everyone is going to be a Bitcoiner, I would argue that it'll be a more secure world in many ways. Of course, there are events happening. You should absolutely take security and privacy seriously, but I don't think that this is our main concern. I think the main concern is actually, if you want to know a playbook, first of all, we got to start with ourselves. Look in the mirror, the man or woman in the mirror, and decide how you're going to make yourself a better person, how you're going to change your own life, and then branch out from there. Change your family, influence your family in a positive way, influence your community, and it grows and builds from there, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if you focus on all the terrible things that can happen, you're going to have a, pretty negative outlook for the next couple of years.
I can't help but go with the cypherpunk model. You have to be prepared, and if you're not, most people aren't paranoid enough, right? And that's kind of the reason why we're getting surveilled in all sorts of ways and stuff like that, and we have governments oppressing us. There's a particular kind of way in which this ends up being very bad for people that might be in this room, right? And yeah, you go from scarcity to abundance, but you have people that are over-consuming, addicted to things, and they don't fix themselves under a Bitcoin standard. Guess what? They might come after you, right? Like this is where I think we have to be more realistic about. Okay, not everyone's going to be singing Kumbaya over a fire anymore. It's going to be there's still going to be evil people. There's still going to be people. Maybe even more people that are addicted to things that see you as like something to harvest and not like another human being. What do we do about that? Like, how do we handle that? Because that's really the part of this transition that I think we have to be ready for.
I can only answer how I handle it. I refuse to live my life in fear. I live my life in abundance, and that thread is everywhere. It's in my relationships, it's in my family, it's in everywhere. And yes, all of these bad things could happen. And if I go tomorrow, I had a great ride. But seriously, I refuse to be trapped in a system that is trying to fearmonger to keep me trapped in it. I refuse. I've chosen different. Yes, there are risks. Being a public person inside that, yes, there are risks. I accept the risks. That is the version of reality I want my kids to know me for.
Well, I think we could go back and forth for a long time on this, but I think we're running out of time. So why don't you guys give it up for the panelists here, as we've got some superstars up here, and thank you guys so much for today. Nice job, guys.